Good afternoon and welcome to Career Mobility in July 2022. We're in a new year, James. It's a fresh slate. What do you see on the horizon, and what does that mean for everybody in sort of our clients' space?
Yeah, look, it's a new financial year, which means a couple of things. So it means it's tax time. It means all our fin services clients are out partying as they finish the end of the financial year. But it actually also brings a fresh landscape when it comes to budget setting and planning for those that run to a June 30 year end. So at the moment, what is going on is a lot of people wrestling through what they've got to work with this year and what that means for them as an organisation. And so, that is all being worked through by our customers in the light of an increasingly complex macroeconomic climate with some of the things we're seeing.
Yeah, it's very interesting times. I mean, both of us have conversations constantly with people in the job market, understanding what's happening out there. And I mean, we're seeing some really interesting things happening as a result of the economic changes. You mentioned the rate rises when we're sort of chatting about this sort of catch up, and it's having some very strange effects on people. So let's talk a bit about that. I think it's, because it's going to impact, definitely to the job market. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so look, I think the rate rises are only one component in all of this, but, and again, this is not a economics lesson, but if I just look at the basic factors that are contributing, right? We've got inflationary pressures which are increasing. We've got increased pressure when it comes to people wanting to negotiate when it comes to REM packages in order to just feel that they're keeping stable and keeping pace with inflation. So there is without a doubt going to be a pressure on salary and salary negotiations, and that's happening in the context of what is still a very candidate favourable market. So nothing has changed. There's been no massive and significant return to big numbers coming back in from a skilled migration perspective. Now, I know there's been a couple of changes just recently by the Australian government to try and actually make that easier. And then you take the broader landscape of people feeling, and we were having a laugh about this in the pre-show catch-up, DJ, that you got people snapping the stalks off broccoli in Coles and Woolies to save a bit of extra money on their veggies. But I mean, this is take all of those things into account. Rents going up, mortgages going up, people feeling the pressure more than ever before. So I think what that means is it's going to start flowing through to people's, and this is the whole intent of the RBA decisions, right, is that it actually stops and it starts putting the handbrake on some of the discretionary spending people have. And that then flows through to a lot of our customers that have a retail business because people are buying less of. They just simply don't have the disposable income they felt they have. The other thing is people are now starting to spend a lot more money playing catch up on their holidays. This backlog, 2-year backlog of holidays and not seeing family and friends. And so that's also creating pressure in that there's a lot of people away and generally on extended leave breaks. People aren't going for 2 weeks, they're going for 4 or 5 week stints back in the UK, back in the US, particularly when it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And so that's actually creating some pressures internally for organisations that are figuring out how they cover the vacancies. So it's a unique time. The one thing we're not seeing change, and we'll probably get into this a little bit in today's discussion, is we're not seeing anytime soon the end of a market where for certain skill sets, there is still a great talent scarcity there. And I'm not seeing or hearing from any of the customers that they think that that's going to end in the near term. And so a lot of the discussions we're having at the moment is around how do we actually make the most of the people we've got? How do we actually provide options? How do we provide upskilling? How do we provide better internal mobility to take people who are valued and have them where we need them and doing the type of roles that the organisation needs in the future. And so that's where, in all of that context I've just given, that's where a lot of the discussion is headed.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There's one thing that you pointed to there as well, which is really interesting, which this year I think is the first year probably anybody is doing this, but it's the opportunity, and it probably started last year, and it's definitely a post-COVID thing, but that opportunity of kind of almost the working holiday has become a bit of looks like it's becoming a bit of a norm. I know a number of people that, as you say, have taken extended breaks, and it's not that they're necessarily on holiday for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. It's that they're actually going to a destination, catching up with family or relaxing, and then actually having holiday and working at the same time. So that's a definite change that we're seeing, which is, I mean, it just did not happen not certainly on scale pre-COVID. So that's definitely one thing that we've seen shift.
That TJ really is, right, a benefit of having to work virtually through COVID, and like the ability to be able to say, well, I work virtually through COVID, trust, in I can still get those outcomes. Yep. And the individuals, and we've had some of our own people do this, and it's not been a problem at all, where they say, I'll manage my time, I'll make sure I'm sort of up early, which actually often works particularly well for them, because they get to do a bit of the work outside of hours and still get to spend some daylight hours catching up with family and friends. But this is one of the fundamental shifts through COVID, is it's really, really hard for employers to come up with a valid reason any longer to say no if the individual commits to getting the same outcomes and keeping things going and productivity, and to actually force the agenda and say, no, if you're away, you must take leave. All that's doing is creating a deficit and pressure on other people who need to fill that void.
Yeah. It's just such an interesting time. So you also spoke before about scarcity in the market, and we know certainly with there being a lack of skilled migration, and processing of visas is at an all-time high, frankly, at the moment. So being proactive in the workplace at the moment, or in transition, is such a great opportunity. And we know that everybody that goes through career transition gets to work with a coach, and they get to really prepare themselves for what's next. It would be great to talk about, in the context of this conversation, your thoughts on what can people be doing to not just be reactive to what's going on, but really look at what's going on currently in the market and be proactive.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be that first question I would say for all of our consultants and for all of the clients who work with us, to answer this question for yourself. How proactive are you being, and how proactive have you been to date? And then what's going to change, right? If the answer to that question, if you can look in the mirror and say, yep, I'm all over it, I'm constantly thinking about what's next and market trends and how I stay ahead of the curve, good on you. But you're probably in a relatively small percentage, right? Most people will say there are some areas where they could have been more proactive at investing in themselves. And that's what it is at the end of the day. I know I've seen this through organisations who work with now and organisations I've worked with previously, where there is a feeling that when the time comes and the role I'm doing and what I'm doing ceases to become relevant, someone or something will magically look after me and everything will be okay. And the proactivity of which I speak is like just continually carving out that time and investing in your learning. It can be as simple as like swapping out social media on the transit in, if you're back in the office at all, for listening to a podcast to better educate yourself. It can be actually utilizing the resources that are at your fingertips when it comes to, learning outcomes. And there's a lot of, it doesn't all have to be paid stuff. There is a significant amount at all different, levels, industries. There is a huge amount of opportunity to invest in, because both government and private sector have a real interest in making sure that people are skilled for the future. And so it's not that difficult a task to go looking to find something that's interesting and that you can actually build in and start investing in and making sure that you continue to keep your skills relevant and to make sure that you continue to be employable, not just for now, but for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, CRN obviously has so many webinars, which, you know, one of the ones when I find myself speaking with clients going through transition, it's really that kind of, you know, being connected on LinkedIn, you know, knowing how to use that amazing kind of machine to kind of help move and give, you know, momentum to that connection and interaction with people and learning. Because there's so much on there. I always say if there were another place to do it, I would suggest it, but this is right now the best place bar any to actually do that.
The CRN is designed for exactly that purpose, as you and I both know, right? It's to actually allow people to find that intersection between the opportunity for the why do I need to invest proactively, and then the resources. And so, you know, the ability to actually go in, and LinkedIn Learning, which is accessible, right, gets better and better all the time in regards to making suggestions and recommendations based on pathways to ensure that you're actually following through and building a collection of learnings, not all long intensive learnings, but a collection of learnings which can actually take you aligned to your interests, to things that will actually help you future-proof, you know, your career and your ability to actually talk about, you know, am I investing in making sure I've got a greater understanding of how to use data and analytics? Am I investing in the opportunity to understand what digitization means for the segment or the industry that I'm working in? Am I actually better understanding, you know, project management and change and transformation programs, which all just seem to be happening at a rapid pace, more so than when I entered the workforce, which, mind you, was a very long time ago. But you know, the pace of these things is happening. Am I actually understanding? Because I know I'm hearing we're doing pilots around agile workforce methodologies, right? All these things, and I've just named a few. There are many others, right? But all of these things, you can actually go and start tracking down a learning pathway. And back to where I started, investing and setting aside some time for this type of learning.
Yeah, no, there's I mean, there's a wealth of things on there. LinkedIn Learning definitely is another one. You mentioned podcasts, they're a brilliant way. And I think it's just following what really genuinely interests you as well. Obviously knowing what's important to your next role and your next industry, but definitely also, you know, keeping yourself motivated and inspired along the journey.
Yeah, and just playing that through. I mean, I'm a big believer in, like, put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? So this is my message to all of those people who are on a journey with us at the moment who are clients. And that would be, if you put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer, and if you're the person who presents and says, oh, you know, on the way in, or yesterday, or on my recent break, I was listening to a podcast about the move from fossil fuel to renewables, and you're interviewing for a role in the resources sector, put yourself in the interviewer's shoes. What do you think about that person who has proactively invested in learning and knowledge versus the person who comes in and just wants to talk through their CV and their background? Like, having a point of view, being interesting, being relevant, and actually having invested in that learning will pay off. And so maybe the other exercise that I would encourage everyone to take is, first and foremost, are you being proactive enough? And then secondly is, have a think about how your story shows up. Put yourself in the shoes of the person you're likely to be speaking to next, in whatever phase you are of your career journey. And say, even if you're looking to transition, even if you're looking to do something like a pathway to entrepreneurship, put yourself in the shoes of the person you're speaking to next and assess, is my story a compelling and interesting story? And do I actually demonstrate to that individual that I'm invested, I've been willing to invest some time and effort into the outcome that I'm seeking?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's brilliant. Look, I think we might wrap on that, because I think that's a really poignant point for this particular discussion today. Very much look forward to seeing what you have in store for us next month, and take care of yourself.
Will do. Thank you so much, TJ. Pleasure as always.
Thank you, James.